our HOG switch. HOG stands for Hot Stick Operated GOAB. This is a single phase version of it, but what's nice is you can see the linkage of how the switch operates. Typical switches are operated with a manual handle from the base of the pole, or possibly a motor operator. In some cases, though, having the linkage running up the pole can be cumbersome because of either a riser pole or communication, too many wires in the communication area. This allows you to operate the switch without any linkage running down. The installation time is a lot shorter because you don't have to build the linkage. Our mechanism is very smooth and easy to operate. I can operate it with one hand. One hand to pull down to open, pull down to close. And it can be done from either a bucket or with a telepole from the ground. A key differential between our HOG switch and our S&C competitor is our switch is 150 BIL, so all the phase spacing is a little bigger, and the way our rocker arm is set up, because of the 150 BIL, we can have a longer rocker arm, okay? And that gives us better leverage. The S&C unit has a much smaller rocker arm, which is about this big, okay? It's about 30% smaller, and that means you need a lot more energy to get the switch mechanism started, okay? And it's a lot harder to use. Con Ed tried it, and the lineman absolutely said, nope, we don't want it. We only want the Bridges HOG switch. I mentioned that there was another way to operate the switch, and that's the motor operated one. So if we step around here to the side, we can see our motorized operated air brake switch. This air brake switch is a little bit different from the other units that you may see in the field. Mr. Bridges, who founded the company, was a mechanical engineer, and he found that a lot of the failure points of traditional switches, or GOABs, were a result of the linkage binding up, or were mechanical in nature, all of the failures that were typical. So he went systematically addressed each one of them to make an extremely reliable switch, so that when a lineman goes out there in the middle of the night and they're issued a switching order and they have to operate this switch at 2 a.m., that it's going to be the most reliable switch that they can get. So one of the typical failure points that I mentioned before was the linkage. And so Mr. Bridges, instead of having, our competitors would have a single operating rod cantilevering the 3 vertical insulators, okay, operating them simultaneously. They're tied together, okay, and it's an external arm, okay. Mr. Bridges took the operating linkage and put it inside of the cross arm, okay, and now he's got 2 operating rods on either side of the insulator shaft, okay. I mentioned one of the common failure points was in our competitors is where the linkage is connected to the insulator. There's usually a set pin that would be drilled into the rod, the operating rod, and that rod sometimes over time would degrade under UV. Well, then that would cause the pin, the set screw that was holding the linkage in place, to slip, and then you would get one phase operating without the outside too. Mr. Bridges addressed that by key slotting the insulator shaft that goes into the rods, and now the whole thing turns smoothly together, as you can see. And with these key slots, there is absolutely no way for that to slip. Another issue that he addressed was in a feature called the pole hugger design. Our competitors would have a link to the center phase, and there would be a little bit of an angle going back to the pole where there's a 7-foot operating shaft that would go down, and then you would have a coupler, and that would be at a slight angle. And anytime there was any angles in the insulator or in the operating linkage, that's a point where the switch might bind up. And so by keeping the operating shaft right up against the pole, it stayed straight and there were no angles and no chances to bind up. Much more efficient. But the reason why the other competitors go to the center phase is price. It's less expensive to just hook up to the center phase than to have to put in another bushing for the linkage. Another benefit to another issue that Mr. Bridges addressed was for installation. Having a single point lifting eye, this is a balanced lifting point. Normally when you take a switch out of the crate, they would have to rig up a sling, okay, and then there's a lot of rigging that has to go into it to get it to hang straight. This has a single point lifting eye, comes right out of the box already balanced. It's very easy for the lineman to install. The other thing is our gain plate here. You have 14-inch bolt hole spacings. So the lineman will first hang these bolts up on the pole, and then with the lifting eye, they can just go straight up, hang it right on the pole, tighten these up, and you're done. Our competitors also have to have a strap that go around the back side to act as a stabilizer. But this gain plate is so burly that you don't need to do that. There's no straps needed to stabilize the switch. The cross arm is rated at 10,000 pounds of balanced load. You have dead end points on it if you would need it. Most customers don't, but if for some reason you wanted to dead end on it and then tap down, you can. Another feature that is very lineman friendly is the hot stick or shotgun removable interrupters. The interrupters come out very easily using the hot stick eye. From that, the advantage to this is before we operate a switch, if there's any question as to the life of the interrupter, I can take it down and do a visual inspection. What I'm looking for, I'm looking at 2 or 3 things. One primarily is, are there any cracks in the housing or any char marks around the housing? Okay. Second, I'm going to operate it and listen for the clean snap. And then I'm going to cock it again. So third thing is then, does it cock and reset evenly? And after a couple of successful operations, I'm satisfied with the way it looks. It goes back in to be installed. Now, these will only go in one way. If I tried to put it in backwards, it won't fit. So they only go in one way, and then they lock into place. This design has been around for 30 years or more, I'd say, in its current stat. There's been some minor upgrades. These were upgraded because there was some, this tip here used to be white in color.